So these are some of the real quick architecture. So we're going to be using 2008 SQL Server. The delivery controller is going to be 7.6 in the environment, and then we'll have the appropriate license server for each one in the system.
David.
So what do we do with XenApp? Yes.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt you really quick because we already have a few questions, and I just, if these are quick ones to answer before we move on, let's just try that, okay? So
okay, no
one
worries.
of the questions is, are you going to be showing StoreFront?
Today, yes.
Okay, great. And what version of StoreFront is it?
2.6.
Okay. And does PowerShell 4.0 work?
Yes.
Okay, great. And does this support VMware 6?
Yes.
All right. And then let's see, just really quick. I think that's good for now. So I think we're just going to save the rest of the questions for the end of the presentation, okay? But I wanted to,
no worries.
I kind of wanted to get ahead of those if we could. So okay, thanks, David.
Yeah, no worries. So we've got this architecture, and we chunked this architecture down into various locations, primarily for we're looking at high availability in what you're going to do in the system. And some of the things that we have, and someone mentioned StoreFront within the system, we do have the capability of using StoreFront inside of the environment to provide access to users that may not have the receiver on their system. So your user layer that we look at, you're usually going to have the Citrix receiver coming in. However, if the user does not have the permissions, or they have a firewall blocking it and we can't get the receiver onto their system, you do have the option of using HTML5 technology to come into the StoreFront and come into your system, and or come in through via NetScaler. So the user can come in, and we deal with that access layer, and we have the StoreFront and NetScaler in the system. Once we get in within that architecture, pretty much nothing changes from earlier versions of XenApp's XenDesktop 5.6. We've got our delivery controllers, which basically are sitting at the center of everything, delivering out the content to our users. And what we're delivering out are going to be operating systems, either Windows 7, Vista, Windows 8, XP if you've got it, as well as applications. And we can give those out to our users. And we can also personalize the user machines by using profile solutions, either AppSense, Citrix roaming profiles, Windows roaming profiles, or even local profiles, and configuring the connections in via a group policy, either through a GPO or through Studio, or giving the user a personal vDisk in which the user is given their own particular drive with their dedicated system. And this will come in and give us the ability to give out desktops and allow the users to personalize them for their use in the system. So what we want to look at today is a couple of things. We're going to look at the delivery controller in the system. So we're going to look at this delivery controller and how we provide out the operating system as well as the application and some of the newer features. We're going to look at StoreFront and how StoreFront can be configured in some of the newer features and the ramifications of using that in the system. So we're going to look at the StoreFront console, we'll look at the Studio console inside of the system, and we'll look at the Director console for monitoring. So the big three when we're dealing with a XenApp 7.6 environment. So when we're looking at publishing out apps, we give out our application servers to our users, and now we no longer use what's called a multi-master system, which requires each server to have updating. In a XenApp 6.5 environment, when you had your XenApp servers, you would create the servers, you would install XenApp on all of it, say 10 servers, and then when you do your updates, you had to ensure that all your servers were updated with the appropriate service packs and hotfixes, and if you did any applications, you had to ensure that all the servers had these installed appropriately. And it was possible, or it's still possible, to publish an application to a server that it's not installed on, and your users would start getting an error message. Well, in 7.6, we now have a mechanism to prevent publishing an application to a server that doesn't exist on it. We use a single master. So instead of creating multiple machines, we create a single machine that will allow us to push it out to multiple systems. So what you're going to see is something like this. You'll come in and you'll create a master machine. So you'll create, say, a master server 2012 in your system. We'll take this master machine and we will allow the system to create a base disk. So it'll create a complete copy of the master, and this will be called the base disk. We will then use that base disk to create and associate it with multiple virtual machines inside of your environment. So you'd have multiple machines inside of your environment, and since each one of these machines is based off of the master machine, they're going to be identical. So anything you install on the master machine will automatically be deployed out to these machines in your system. These machines will be what we use to deploy out resources. And this particular component, this is called a catalog. So this would be a catalog of server machines. And we'll use these as the mechanisms for deploying out applications and/or desktops. Anytime I need to update my system, I would come back to the master machine. I would apply my updates to the master machine, update the base disk, and these machines would automatically get these in your system immediately. So let's go ahead and look at this now. We're going to go in and we're going to look at publishing an application. So if I come onto my system here, this is my studio, and this is going to show me what I have available within my system. And I have a series of catalogs that I have already created in my system. That's getting popped up here. So these are the catalogs I have, and I currently have a hosted apps catalog in the system, and I have some application server catalogs. So let's say I'm looking at focusing on the deployment of my applications. So what I want to do is deploy my applications in the system. So I'm going to edit this, and I'm going to, I've created this machine, and I'm going to deliver these out to my users. So you'll see my hosted applications. So I'll come into the system here, and I'm going to add in an application. And here's how simple it is to add in an application onto a system. I'm going to click Start. What the system will do is it will immediately query one of the servers in the catalog that is being used. And it will look at everything that's installed on that machine currently. And then you can then come in and say, you know what, I want to publish calculator, and just as one thing to publish. We'll just publish a couple of things very quickly. We'll publish calculator. I'll go ahead and publish PowerPoint, and that's enough. So I could click all of these. All the systems will have identical configuration settings, so you don't need to worry about misconfiguring your system. You know that these are on the machine because they are all on the master machine. And if I needed to, I could come into a particular system and change the properties of that one application and how it's, the name of the system, how it's going to be delivered. So this one's telling me that it's already published in the system. So we already have this published. It detected that I already have one somewhere in the system. I can create a category inside of StoreFront for this. So we'll call this Desktop Publishing on the system. Where is it located? So this is telling me where it's located on the server. I can do any command arguments that I need, working directory. I can also limit the visibility. So one of the differences between 7.6 and 6.5 is that when you publish your delivery groups out, you give it to everybody. So this would be given to everybody, but I could come in and limit the visibility on this. So I'll just go and click OK, and I've published an application, and I'll click Next, and now I've got my application published. And if I look at the applications on the system, there's my Microsoft. You'll see that Microsoft has been published several times inside of the system, so I've got it published twice. Now, one of the newer features in 7.6 from the earlier versions of 7.1 and 7.5 is the ability to organize your applications into folders. So we have the ability to come in and organize the applications inside of Studio by folders according to what we need in the system. This is analogous to what you could do in the App Center in XenApp 6.5 for administrative purposes. These folders won't have any impact on StoreFront or how StoreFront displays it, only for display within our system here. So this is how you publish an application inside of our system. Well, some of the newer features we have, and I've already talked about one of them, is going to be, two of them, came as a direct result of response from users. And we have 3 new options with 7.6 that are great features. We've brought back session lingering so that when the user logs out their last application, session lingering will keep the session lingering in the system for a set period of time. We've got the ability to pre-launch a session so that when the user logs in via the receiver for web, the system will pre-launch a session on the server in hopes that the user will come in. And we've also got that application folder organization within our system. So you have different new options. So let's go ahead and look at how you do these. I showed you the application folder. Well, let's look at how we actually publish an application and deal with lingering. So on my hosted apps, if I'm interested in this particular deployment being sent out to users and I want them to come in and have a session linger or pre-launch, I come into the system and I choose to turn this on. So I can launch the session when any user in the delivery group that I've assigned this to logs on. So if I had assigned this to domain users, anyone that logs on will automatically launch a session for them. Or you can do specific users and only give specific users that capability. So let's say you have an administrative team that you want to give them the pre-launch capability, but your sales team, you don't need to do that. You could come in and be very granular on what you want to do. Now the default is this is turned off. So I'll just go ahead and say when any user that I've assigned this comes in. All right? So now I have to be specific on the system. Like they may have come into the system, but they may not launch an application today. They could just be sitting at their desk doing paperwork. So you'll want to turn off that session. You want to terminate it, return those resources back to the server. So we're going to turn this off. The default is 2 hours. So I'm going to say I'm going to put this at minutes. I'm going to say if you haven't launched an application within 30 minutes, I'm going to terminate the session. You also have the ability to respond to what's going on in your system by looking at the load of the machines that are hosting these applications. So you can terminate the session when all the machines that you've hosted this on, their load exceeds 70%, or when any machine exceeds 70%. So you can clear out empty sessions that you don't need in the system. The user may come in later, but they'll have to deal with the slowness. Application lingering is on the back end of the system, and this is where you can say, all right, the user has logged out of their last application. How do you want to deal with their session? Do we want to keep it up, or do we want to close it out immediately? The default is to close out the session immediately, or we can keep it active, and the default is 8 hours. So I'm going to go ahead and change this to minutes. So I'll go ahead and change this to 60 minutes, and we'll let it stay for 60 minutes. Now, why do you do the pre-launch and the lingering? These are to minimize the user-perceived launch time of applications in a session. Whenever we have a session, we need to load policy, create the HDX. These two features help to minimize the impact that they'll have on the user. The session's already there, so the application will look like it launches immediately inside of the system. So these are what we have on the user side for, on the XenDesktop side for publishing the applications. Well, so this gives us that capability, and we can put these guys into folders for administration in our system. So we can do pre-launch, we can linger our system, and basically we've seen these already, and we've done our folder organizations. We've already got these guys. So this is what you can do inside of the system. Well, how does this play out when you're dealing with the SQL Server and the database? Another new feature which addresses the concerns that a lot of users had regarding the local host cache. In a XenApp 6.5 environment, the local host cache allowed you to continue brokering connections into applications even if the data store went down. In the first iterations of XenApp in 7.1 and 7.5,
David,
the site database. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, and I should have noticed this sooner.
Yeah.
we see your PowerPoint slides, but we don't see your console.
They're seeing the really?
Yeah.
Oh, let's see here. You're right, they're not.
That's better. Okay, thank you.
I'm not, okay, yeah, okay. Did you see it earlier, Rich?
You know, I was busy reading questions, and I started getting questions for you to share your console. So I don't know if you had it on there before, but.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm on the PowerPoint right now. We're good.
So you've been switching back and forth. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, I've been switching back and forth.
Okay, great, thanks.
So, yeah. So with connection leasing, what the system will do now is it will broker connections that have been cached within the previous 2 weeks. So what the system will do is, and I'm going to pop on over to my whiteboard here. What the system will do is this. You'll have your delivery controllers. So let's say we have 2 delivery controllers. We'll have our SQL Server database in the system. So we'll have our controller 1 and controller 2 in the system. We'll have a SQL Server database for the site. When a user comes into the system and brokers a connection, so you've got a user coming in, when the user launches an app, the system will cache that. So if this machine launches Word somewhere in the system, the controller is going to remember the settings that Word used to launch on the user's machine. Periodically, this cache, the connection leasing cache, will be synchronized onto the database server and then pushed out to all of the other controllers in the system. Then, if the SQL Server database goes down, if the user comes in again and launches Word, they'll be able to launch Word using the previously cached connection settings. So you don't have to worry about your system being totally down and out if your SQL Server database goes down. Now, there are some limitations to that. This is not recommended for very, very large deployments. You want to ensure you have high availability in your system. So, and this is turned on by default, so you don't need to do anything. This is automatically going to work inside of your system. Another downside is any new users coming in will not have any cache settings, so they won't be able to connect into the system. And if they've not launched an application, say Excel, within the last 2 weeks, they won't be able to get into Excel. But this will get them into when the user does have something that they're using in the environment. All right. So the other thing we look at is going to be StoreFront. And I'm going to pop on over to my end user device. Let me go to my endpoint device here. Get rid of this guy here. Hang on one second. So I've got a user here, and he's going to log on. I'm going to log him onto the system here. And we'll do, and this is my StoreFront deployment. So he's logged on. I have an apps and a desktop, and I have the applications that I have on my system. So this is one particular storefront. So we've got the ability to come in, and if I look at this, there's that desktop publishing folder I created inside for PowerPoint. So there's PowerPoint is now displaying in a folder on the subscription menu on storefront. If I go to all apps, this will show all the apps that I have available for that user. The user would need to subscribe to these in order to launch the system. So when we're dealing with StoreFront, some of the newer features inside of StoreFront are, come on, StoreFront 2.6 now supports or continues to support the HTML5 engine, so that if the user does not have the receiver installed on their machine, they can't install receiver on their system, we can still get them into the environment using HTML5. Most of your latest browsers will support that. We also have the ability to do mandatory applications. Now, what are mandatory applications? Mandatory applications are this. When the user comes into the system, by default, when they log on, they're not going to see any applications. So I'm going to remove these applications. So the user is not going to see anything. This is what they're going to see. So StoreFront now supports, or will support, mandatory applications. And with a mandatory application, what you'll see is on a machine, let's say that I want Microsoft Office to be a mandatory application. This is going to be on their splash screen for StoreFront on the system. So I'm going to change its configuration. And this is where we've come in and we put in what are called keywords. And I'm going to put mandatory. I'll just apply that. So I've added in a description called keywords mandatory. And if I go over to the user's device here and I refresh, the system will refresh it. And on the Apps tab, you're going to see Microsoft Office. If the user attempts to right-click and remove it, they don't have the option to remove it. This is a mandatory application that's going to show up whenever they log on, and they will not be able to use it. All other apps, they would need to come in and subscribe to. Well, I also have another option, in addition to that mandatory, whereby I can take an application, say PowerPoint. I can do another keyword on this, and I'm going to make this one auto. And I'll apply that and click OK. And this will come in, and now the system is going to auto-publish this. So when the user comes into the system here, I'll go ahead and refresh my screen. And it will auto-subscribe PowerPoint. The difference between these two being the user will have the option to remove it. So you can, new applications, you can put in there, auto-subscribe it. Then if the user wants to remove it, they can then remove it, and you're good to go. All right, well, that's great. Yeah. The downside to this is you need to come in and do your keywords on your system so that they're going to work. Your users may not be happy with not having all their applications. So you have another option in your system with the environment, and this deals with StoreFront. And on StoreFront, what you can configure is, and we're going to pop over to StoreFront here in a second. I'm going to log on as a user, HR user 2. This is a different StoreFront. You're going to see on the Apps tab everything. And notice there's that folder for desktop publishing that I created. This is going to display everything on their splash screen. And this is a configuration setting inside of StoreFront for your stores. So I'm going to have a store here. And over here on the right-hand side, you're going to see the option to enable user subscriptions. Right now, it's disabled. By disabling user subscriptions, you put everything on their desktop. This is a nice way of transitioning your users from the web interface that they may be familiar with into the StoreFront that they may be unfamiliar with on your system. So we have that ability to give to come in and use the system with subscriptions or not having subscriptions in the system. And then if we go to the receiver for web on the system, another feature that we now have is the ability to change the session timeout on the system. So we can change the session timeout from 20 minutes to whatever you want. This is a new feature. You used to have to do this via the web config file. Now you don't have to do that. New feature, they just, new old feature. They had this inside of the web interface. Also, when you deploy the receiver, you have the option of when the user comes into StoreFront, do you want to, if they don't have the receiver, is the system going to install it? Are we going to use receiver fail, HTML, if the receiver install fails, or are we just going to go right to installing using HTML5? So you have the option of configuring that inside of your system. And then another new feature inside of StoreFront that you're going to see is going to be this anonymous, unauthenticated access for your users. This requires you to create a special store just for users that do not need to log on into the environment. kiosk situations, schools, hotels, public machines. So we can create an anonymous, unauthenticated access inside of our system. There are a couple of things you need to do, but I've created an anonymous site already, and this will, the user will be able to come into this machine without being authenticated. So we don't require authentication, and this will manifest itself like this. The user will come into the system. They'll go to the website. It will not require them to log on. They can then come in, and now they have their storefront. They can log on and use that particular application. There are some requirements on the back end that you'll need to do in order to get this to work as well. So that's running storefront quick and dirty. There's a lot more under the hood that you'll learn if you take one of the classes. The other option we have when we're dealing with the new environment is we do have some parallel resource enumeration with this one. Storefront, if you have multiple deployments of, say, XenApp 6.5, XenDesktop, it will enumerate the applications in parallel rather than sequentially. Web Interface did it sequentially. Now we'll do them all at once. This helps to speed up some things. We have some pass-through authentication, smart card authentication now for the system, as well as coming through Netscaler Gateway in the environment. And then the last component we're going to look at is looking at the monitoring of your system. When you need to monitor what your users are doing or how your system is working, what are you going to use? So now we have Citrix Director, and this is going to give you a comprehensive monitoring and troubleshooting tool that you can look at your Citrix environment. And this one gives you the ability, or your help desk team, the ability to come in, shadow your users, control the desktops, control the sessions in your system, as well as giving you a single pane to look at items in your system and allow you to control what's going on in your environment. Now, what they've done is they've created a hybrid device or component integrating some of the older Edge site components into Citrix Director without requiring you to install any components on your machines. So you'll just have this Director component. You'll be able to monitor your systems and what's going on and control what's going on. In addition, they've added in a licensing component for monitoring the licensing inside of your environment. So your help desk team can monitor this. And what you're going to see is something that looks just like this. You're going to have a single pane. This will be your, as soon as it pops up here, there we go. This will be your single pane for your help desk team to come and look at components. Now I'm going to minimize everything. Normally, if your system is running great and you don't have any problems, you're going to see the pane as it looks right now. This is going to give you sessions connected inside of your system. How long did their sessions take to log in? What's going on with your infrastructure? Do we have any alerts on our hypervisor? If you have failed components, a user connection failure, a failed desktop, a failed server, or you've got something going on with your licensing that you need to address, these components will automatically expand and allow you to look at what's going on. So we have 4 areas that we look at. We look at the left. This is a description of what you're looking at. A user connection failure over the last hour. Everything on this page is in the last hour. So we can look at the total user connections and where did it happen. Was it a configuration error, unavailable capacity, no born licensing? And then when you do have this, where did it happen? On what group that you applied out did this error occur? And then how many did we have within the last hour? So we can look at a historical trend to see what's going on. We can also look at the licensing, what's going on with your licensing within your system. So you have this capability using Director. Well, if you're interested and you're looking at your help desk team needs to see what's going on with your users, they can click on the sessions connected, and this will populate the users that are currently logged on into the system. And you can look at the user. You can control their session. You can turn them on or off. So I could say on these machines, I could log them off or disconnect them from the session. I could send them a message as necessary in the system. If I need to tunnel down into a particular user, I want to look at what this particular user is doing, I can double-click on the user, and this will then pop me into an activities manager, which will show you what's going on with your user right now, where they're working. So currently this user is running an application. They've also got a desktop that they're running. So let's go ahead and look at the desktop and see what's going on the desktop. So right now the user's not doing anything on the desktop, he just has it up and running. But I can look at the task manager on the desktop and see what's going on. So I could come in and turn something off. If I needed to, I could come in and shadow the user if I have the remote assistance set up. But if I'm interested in even more on the system, I can come over here and you'll see on the far right, you'll see the details. And I can click on the details pane, and this will populate the details page since he updates. There we go. This will give me more information about what's going on in the system with processes in the application. So we've got a minimized activity manager. What's going on the actual machine that the user is logged in on? What's the name? What type is it on? What's the IP address? Then I can come over and I can look at the session details. So what's going on in the session for this user? So is he active? How long has he been active? Where is he running it from? I can look at the policies that may be applied to this particular session in the environment. I can look at any hosted apps he may be running. And if I'm running Smart Access via Netscaler, I can come and look at the Smart Access on the system. And then if I scroll down a little bit more, I can look at how long did it take to log on, how long did it take the VM to start, how long did it take for me to create the HDX connection, how long did it take to authenticate, apply my GPOs, etc. You can look at what's going on in the system. You can also look at the personalization options you have in your system. Now, on this particular machine, we don't have anything set up for roaming profiles, so this one is grayed out. We also don't have a personal VDS because this is a server machine and doesn't give us that option. So you can tunnel down in the system as necessary, and if I needed to, I could shadow the user by using a remote assistance. So I'll go ahead and open this. I'll need to go over to the machine and go to my server desktop. Which one is he on? There it is. And just say yes, the user will have to accept it. You will have to set up your Windows permissions. And then you can come in and you can then shadow the user as necessary in the system and see what's going on in the system. So that's Director in a nutshell. So, and one of the biggest issues, or one of the issues that a lot of users come in when they're coming from XenApp 6.5 is they keep hearing the term XenDesktop, XenDesktop, XenDesktop. Well, the issue really is it's all about the licensing. It really is. XenApp 7.6 comes in 3 levels of licensing: Advanced, Enterprise, and Platinum. Each level gives you additional capabilities in your system. But in essence, when you have a XenDesktop license, XenDesktop 7.6, Enterprise or Platinum, you're basically getting all the features of XenApp 7.6 with the added benefit of having desktops. So that's 7.6 in a nutshell. With that, Rich, I'll go ahead and turn it back over to you for question and answer.
Great, David. Thank you. I had to unmute.
I think that's it.
All right. So fortunately, we have a highly interactive audience today, David. We've got
Awesome.
Lots of questions. And before I start reading the questions, if we don't answer your question to your satisfaction, or you want a little more detail, go ahead and just shoot me an email after the webinar with your question, and what I'll do is I'll engage or forward it to David, and he can respond to you via email. And some of these questions I'm going to try my best because they were in context with a certain part of the presentation, and
Okay.
it'll be hard for me to connect the dots, but you might be able to, David.
Okay.
Okay, so Chris wanted some clarification on PowerShell, and
Okay.
so he asked if PowerShell 4.0 is supported, and PowerShell 5.0 is coming out soon. So yeah, what's the scenario with that?
With 5.0, I don't know whether it should be supported on 5.0, and 4.0 should be supported as well. So you should be able to do it. When you install your controllers on the servers, it's automatically going to put the PowerShell on. You'll have to ensure you obviously install the Citrix extensions on there. One of the things that you do have when you're looking at the when you're on your control, that's my storefront server. When you're on your storefront server or your controllers here, one of the options you have is you have a PowerShell component here, and it will automatically launch the PowerShell for you in the system on your controller. So it automatically has PowerShell working in your environment. So you've already got that. Okay.
Okay, thanks, David. Okay, this is a question about a customer that's using F5 in their environment. Can you still load balance the delivery controllers behind an F5 for XML?
Yes. Yes. So for when your storefronts are, you can F5 can be used for load balancing. The NetScaler is a little bit easier to load balance, but you can use the F5.
And it looks like they're currently doing that in XenApp 6.5. So nothing's going to change there?
Nothing changed.
Okay. Okay, vSphere, so this is a question about supporting VMware. Okay, so vSphere, due to the recent release of 6.0, Jeff wants to just make sure that XenApp 7.6 supports vSphere 6.0.
I'll have to double check on that one, Rich.
Okay.
I'll have to double check the latest literature on that.
Hey, Jeff, if you wouldn't mind just sending me an email so we can follow up with you on that. I'd appreciate it. And my email address is easy to remember. It's rich, R-I-C-H, at layer8training.com. Okay, moving down the list of questions. Is merchandising server still used?
Good question. I like merchandising server. Merchandising server is still used. There is some murmurs that it may be deprecated out due to lack of use. So yes, it's still out there. It's still supported.
Okay, great. Okay, this is a question about Xen Server by Tony. I saw Xen Server 6.2 is the highest version that is supported, but what about 6.5?
6.5 should be supported on that one. I have not worked with 6.5 yet, but I would be stunned if it weren't supported.
Considering it's a Citrix
yes.
hypervisor, yeah. And
yeah.
Tony, if you want to email me, I can actually get probably more details for you from the support readiness team over at Citrix. Okay, can you still publish XenApp server desktops?
Yes. So one of the options you have when you're publishing, when you're creating your system here, I'll go and close this out. One of the options you can do is create a server desktop rather than doing applications. You can do you would do a server desktop, and I think I've got a machine here. Let me double check here. Making sure I've got the machines here. So I've got this app server. So if I look at the delivery group, the option on this one is to give out desktops and apps, but you can do desktops and apps, and applications. So yes, you can give out a server desktop.
Okay, great. So we have about 6 minutes left, and we have several more questions. So I'm going to keep going, David.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Any additional health checks to make sure XenApp server is healthy before joining it to the farm?
Okay, we don't have XenApp servers and we don't have farms. Within a that would be a XenApp 6.5
scenario.
Question,
okay.
Really. Yeah, scenario. Basically, just so you guys are aware of this, let me get my system back up here. What you're going to see in the environment is this. You're going to have your controllers. These would be your XenDesktop, XenApp. This is your XenApp, and this is your delivery controller. All right. So your delivery controller never has a user on it. This is the only component that would have the XenApp 7.6 component on it. Everything else in your environment, what's going on there? Everything else in your environment, all your other machines are just going to be server 2012s or 2008 servers. That's it. So you're not going to have you're not going to have any management functions on those other machines. So you would have a series of machines inside of your environment that are running the applications. So this is where your apps would run in the system. My system's being weird. This is where all your applications are going to run, or your server desktops. These won't have any XenDesktop component on here other than a component called the Virtual Delivery Agent. That's all you need to know. That's all it needs.
Okay, thanks, David. Okay, this next question. What happens if master server gets hosed? Can one of the catalog servers be promoted?
Okay. Yeah, okay, so yeah, you can. So basically what you can do is this, and I'm going to go into my particular lab to show you this. I've got these two server machines. These are the hosting servers that I have in the environment. These machines are going to be based off of the base disk that I mentioned earlier. So these base disks, the base disk for this particular machine is going to be right there. That's the base disk. The master machine that was used to create this base disk is this guy right here. If I were to delete this machine, nothing will happen to the current machines at all. They'll continue to run because they're running off of that base disk. If I need to update them, I would need to create a new master machine, do whatever I need, and then create a new base disk for the system. But if this were to get hosed, no problem. We don't promote anything. You don't have to worry about promotion. You just create the machine. Then you update your catalog, and it updates the base disk.
Okay, great. This is a related question about the base disk. This customer does not run VMs. They run big physical hardware. So does the base disk methodology still apply?
No, but if you're using the existing machines, that base disk methodology does not apply.
Okay. Okay, regarding XenApp and publishing applications, you mentioned that you can update the master, which will then update the catalog servers. These updates are just speaking about applications, published applications. Sorry, I'm not really understanding how the question is phrased. Is there anything you caught there, David, that you could elaborate on?
Yeah, I think what they're asking is anything you do on the master image. So if I have this Windows 2012 master, and I come in and I update the operating system, I add in new applications, the machines that are based off of this will take on those characteristics. So if I have an R2 and let's say we have R3 coming out and I upgrade things, these machines, once I update the machines and the base disk, they'll automatically take on those characteristics. Anything you do to the master will go out to the machines based off of it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we're running out of time, so I'm going to just jump around and kind of cherry pick some questions here. Do we publish web links in the same way as 6.5, such as publishing Internet Explorer and then specifying the URL?
No, well, it's similar. You go to StoreFront and you can create a web page with links on it, so it's a little bit different.
Okay.
Slightly different.
Okay, can lingering be used for to publish desktops or for publishing desktops?
It's not on the client desktop, but on the on applications only. Yeah, it's on applications. If I try to do that on a server desktop catalog, so if I go into the system here and I'm looking at so I don't have any, it's on a random here. If I go to this guy here and I edit the delivery group, I don't even have the option for lingering on desktops on that. It's only on servers and only for applications.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so everyone, I apologize that we don't have time to get to all the questions. David's actually teaching a class this week, and presented this webinar during his lunch break. So David, we really appreciate you taking the time, and for your students, hopefully they were able to attend the webinar as well. I do still have a list of these questions with the name of the person that submitted the question. So what I'm going to do, you guys, is I'm going to follow up with you on these questions that you've asked. In the meantime, if you want more elaboration or any additional information or a little bit deeper detail of answers for your specific scenario, and please keep in mind we're not consultants, but we're happy to kind of give you a few tips and tricks. Please don't hesitate to shoot an email to me, and I will engage the right resource on my end to answer the question for you. So with that, we are going to sign off. I did get a lot of questions as to whether the webinar was being recorded, and it is being recorded. You will be emailed a link to the recording that you can retrieve, and the recording will also be posted on the webinar section of layer8training.com, which is our website. We really appreciate you taking the time to attend today. We had over 200 attendees, which is great. That means that obviously there's a lot of interest in this technology, and we appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to spend an hour with us. On behalf of Layer 8 Training, again, we thank you, and this ends the webinar for today. Thank you very much.